To apologize because this is not a complication case. I didn't realize that it was a complication session. So when I had a communication with Dr. Abdallah, because I have a book of complications, should that be necessary. But anyhow, I think I will present you something which is interesting. So two cases for a kind of an unusual scenario. 65-year-old male, he underwent a PCI of the ostium of the RCA 3 years ago. He had a relapse of angina. He was catheterized, as you will see here, and there was an aorta ostial instant CTO. This was done live during a meeting in Milan. You see the concept here. The patient, this is the coronary angiogram from the left system, and you can appreciate that the right coronary artery is occluded, and there is a stent. It's clearly visible here. So they are making an attempt. The initial intervention film was not available. To engage the right coronary artery, and you can appreciate that the stent is protruding into the aorta, as you can appreciate here. They try to make an antegrade attempt to open this right coronary artery, and you see that the guiding catheter actually is deforming anymore the part of the stent that is protruding in the aorta, and the procedure failed. So we did live this case in Milan during a meeting a couple of years ago, and in this kind of case, as you can appreciate, there is only one guide at this point, and primary retrograde attempt was the initial choice. You see, this is a Sion wire, and this is a typical way of septosurfing. There is not even a microcatheter, actually. When you just get whatever you get, the wire went into the septal, and then the purpose was to put in the LAD. So you saw the crossing of this, and then microcatheter failed initial microcatheter failed to go through this. As you will appreciate, we're pushing. This is turnpike, I think. And then LP, it reaches down the point of the connection to the right coronary artery, but over there was a lot of resistance. The wire was coming back, and then while the wire was coming back, we pushed it, and you saw that it crossed into the aorta. So the occlusion was quite short, and another thing that it is very interesting, and that's part of presenting the case, is that you see that the wire goes through the occlusion of the stent. It was a short stent anyway. You see the deformation from the previous angioplasty, and you see that it goes through the struts. And that's a very interesting point because the main thing that you have to do, as you will see here, even if the stent, if the wire was going through the entire length of the stent, this should have been avoided. I'm going to touch a little bit on the floating wire again. So this is the right thing to do. The stent should go through the strut to the aorta that is really protruding, and you have to exclude the rest of the protruding stent with intervention, as you will see what happened here. Another microcatheter is going through. This is a fine cross. You see that it's crossed easily. The job was done by the previous one. So microcatheters are complementary, and you see that the fine cross is really reaching this part. We keep on pushing. It was not very easy to go through. But as you will see, finally, this was possible to be done. So the microcatheter reached the stent, and then it was advanced into the aorta. At this time point, the main thing is to get into, as you see, there is no as yet an antegrade guiding catheter. So what we did is that we used an end snare, and you see here that we grab the retrograde wire. One key point here that you have to do is that you never snare short wires. You should snare long wires. This was an RG3 330. Despite the fact that the lesion was crossed with a Sion wire, the wire was externalized, and what is important from afterwards, the case is getting in the good track. There was a pre-dilatation with various balloons. This is the last one, I think 2.5 by 50, non-compliant balloon. And if you're careful, you will see the excluded stent at this time point. There was not even a very big protrusion. Here, you do a kind of a flaring into the aorta, so you push much of the protruding stent away. And here again, the floating wire, as you can appreciate here, if you want to do really ostial stenting, it helps. If you see it here, there is a lot of attenuation of the metal that has been more or less crushed away from the ostium of the right coronary artery. And then again here you see the metal, some other projections, the inflation over there. You take the balloon, the wire that it was in the sinuses, post-dilatation with a 4-0 balloon. IVUS that I'm not going to show you show that there is a good expansion, and that's the final result here. Always you finish, you see there was a very dominant right big coronary artery. The patient has been benefited. So that's one case. There is a second case. This was done actually in Cairo, in a meeting in a hospital there. This is a patient that has twice an intervention in the right coronary artery. I don't know exactly the setup of this. You see he has very complex coronary artery disease with a diabetic patient with 2 diagonals. The LAD there calcified. He has also stenosis 90% in the circ. Anyhow, the right was occluded, and that was aorta ostial occluded, as you will see here. And if you may see in this case, this stent is really protruding around 10 millimeters outside of the aorta. I don't know how or why it was necessary. Maybe it was an acute setting, but there was a lot of protrusion as compared to the previous case. You see the first stents here. You see the second stent there that is going around 10 millimeters in the ostium of the right, in the aorta. Retrograde access, not to make it with very long, was achieved finally through septals. Here the microcatheter went through. This is an Corsair XS. In these kind of cases, I always knuckle wires, and you see a knuckling if you want to go into the stent, but the knuckle in this case didn't work well because you see that it went completely outside of the stent. So actually we took it back, and then we made some tip injection, and again with a Gaia third this time. The first one was a Gaia first. It went through to true without much. The nice things about stent is that when you're really go outside, essentially you do not disturb the tissue inside. So the fact that we did a knuckle didn't cause any major dissection as far as it was outside of the caging. You see here where the stent is extending. You understand what I mean? But as you can appreciate, this wire actually went again from struts into the aorta, excluding, which is the key point, all of that part of the stent into the aorta. You'll see here, what was nice, we didn't need a snare. Somehow we advanced the microcatheter, and you can appreciate this is one of the very few cases that actually we were able to enter the antegrade guide without much. This was the bonus you can appreciate here. You just go into this. The rule is that you will need a snare. And just keep focusing here how long the stent is excluded in the aorta. What happened here is that we advanced the microcatheter into the antegrade guide, and over here what you should see is that there was not available a long wire. So an RG3 was not available in this cath lab at that time. I didn't know. So what we did is that we brought a second microcatheter. We did a tip-in. As you can appreciate, microcatheter retrograde, you take the wire and you get into the antegrade microcatheter. And then we follow this classical maneuver that pull and push. You take the retrograde microcatheter out, you insert the antegrade microcatheter in, and then actually over the same wires, you reach this. It's a very nice technique when you don't have long wires. And what happened in this case, because the intervention was going to be challenging, we pushed the antegrade microcatheter anymore quite deep into the septals. And what happened here is that we entered now, we externalized, essentially, we put a wire anymore the other way around from the antegrade from the antegrade to the retrograde microcatheter. And there was an inflation done to stabilize the entire system because I didn't know how much pushing would have been necessary. It was a complex intervention, and you see that the balloons are going, but the catheter is buckling up. Anyway, with the inflations, you see some deep engagement of the guidings. I'm coming from an old school. I did my first 1,000 angioplasties with 5 friends in Rotterdam, so the guiding catheter extensions were not used to this time. And you can appreciate with proper handling, you can really insert your guiding deep. And then the rest of the procedure was done with, let's say, pre-dilatations. Stents are implanted here. It was quite an extensive disease over there. Some additional stenting has been done in the ostium. In this case, it was not necessary to put a wire, but you see how much stent has been excluded there. You see the inflation in the ostium, and you see the stent that is being crushed outside of the ostium, and a new ostium has been created excluding the old ostium. some more dilatations, and this is the final result. I just have one last slide for 10 seconds, 1 minute please, just to make the conclusion. So you see two different, can I just have this? The point is that you have a different scenario in different occasions, that there is a necessity to go beyond the regular thing, and we know that today we have the undergrade, the retrograde, and dissection reentry techniques, and all of these are complementary as well as the materials, and that operators should be familiar with all of these things. Thank you. So the techniques are complementary, and then the retrograde techniques today are standardized, and we should apply them in cases. And these two cases that I presented you, I think the retrograde application was the only solution available. Thank you.